The city was already awake when Liam Hayes stepped out of his penthouse. Down below, New York hummed with noise and money, the same energy that built his fortune and poisoned his trust. Reporters called him the Ice Prince of Wall Street. In truth, he was just tired. Tired of smiles that came with price tags. Tired of love that started with a signature, not a heartbeat. He pulled on a plain grey hoodie, faded jeans and sneakers that had never seen sunlight until this morning. For once, he didn't look like a man worth billions. He looked like someone who hadn't slept, which wasn't far from the truth. His driver, Marcus, eyed him in confusion. "Sir, you're sure about this, walking around dressed like that?" Liam smirked. "You make it sound like I'm going to war." Marcus sighed. "In this city, kindness is rarer than peace. Be careful what you're testing." Liam slipped on a pair of sunglasses. "That's exactly what I want to find out." He'd read too many articles about loyalty tests, fake girlfriends, and social media gold digger experiments. All of it disgusted him. But part of him, the part that still remembered his mother teaching him to believe in people, wanted to prove that decency wasn't extinct. He'd live 1 week as a broke man. No credit cards, no assistants, no penthouse. Just a wallet with $40 and a challenge. Could he meet someone who treated him like a person, not a prize? He walked for blocks, passing polished suits and empty smiles, until the glitter of downtown faded into the grit of the Lower East Side. That's where he found it, a small diner called the Morning Star. Its neon sign buzzed like a tired heartbeat, flickering against the grey morning. Inside, the smell of burnt coffee and fried bacon hit him like a memory. It was the scent of simpler times, when his father was still alive, and breakfast meant laughter instead of board meetings. He chose a booth in the corner. The vinyl was cracked. The table rocked slightly when he leaned on it. Perfect. A waitress approached, her name tag reading Clara. She looked no older than 25, but the dark circles under her eyes told a longer story. Her smile wasn't the polished, fake kind he was used to. It was soft, real. "Morning," she said. "Coffee?" "Yeah," he murmured. "Black?" She nodded and poured without hesitation. The cup was chipped. The coffee was strong enough to peel paint. It was the best thing he'd tasted in years. Liam watched her move between tables, balancing plates, refilling glasses, and apologizing to customers who didn't deserve her patience. There was no glamour here, no one trying to impress him, no curated perfection, just survival, served with a smile. When she passed by again, he asked, "Rough morning?" Clara laughed quietly. "It's Tuesday. They're all rough." Her honesty startled him. Most people lied to make themselves sound better. She didn't. She didn't need to. He looked at his reflection in the coffee. For the first time in a long while, he didn't see the heir to Hayes Holdings or the face on the financial magazine covers. He just saw a man searching for proof that the world still had a pulse. When Clara brought the check, he patted his pocket, pretending to realize he had no wallet. I think I left my cash at home." Her expression didn't change. No judgment, no irritation, just quiet understanding. "It's fine," she said softly. "You can pay next time." He froze. She didn't even know him, yet she trusted him. Marcus's words echoed in his mind. "Be careful what you're testing." Liam leaned back, studying her as she turned to help another table. He'd come here to test the world's kindness. He didn't know the world was about to test his heart. The alarm buzzed at 4:30 a.m., sharp and merciless. Clara Monroe groaned, rolling over on the thin mattress that barely qualified as a bed. The air in her tiny apartment was cold enough to see her breath. She stared at the ceiling for a moment, gathering the strength to move. In the next room, a soft, rattling cough broke the silence. "Dad?" she whispered, throwing on a worn hoodie as she stepped into the narrow hallway. Her father, Dean Monroe, sat hunched in his armchair, an oxygen tube under his nose, the hum of the machine filling the room like background noise. His eyes fluttered open. "You're up early, honey." Clara smiled weakly. "Same as every day." She adjusted the blanket over his legs, pretending not to notice the pile of unpaid medical bills on the coffee table. "You don't have to keep working doubles," he said quietly. "Yeah, I kinda do," she replied, forcing a laugh. "Unless you've got a secret bank account I don't know about." He smiled faintly, but his eyes were tired. "You deserve more than this." "Right now," she said, tying her hair into a messy ponytail, "what I deserve is a decent cup of coffee." By 5:15, she was out the door, her breath turning white in the pre-dawn chill. The city was just waking up, delivery trucks rumbling, streetlights fading, the smell of rain and exhaust mixing in the air. She walked the 8 blocks to the Morning Star Diner, her sneakers soaked by puddles, her mind running through the day's math. Rent due in 4 days, prescriptions tomorrow, groceries tonight, if she skipped lunch. Inside the diner, the familiar warmth wrapped around her like an old coat. She clocked in, tied her apron, and forced her smile into place. The neon sign outside flickered Morning Star, missing its G. Somehow, that felt appropriate. "Morning, Clara," called Rita, the cook, flipping pancakes with a cigarette hanging from her lips. "You look like you fought a bear." "Lost, too," Clara muttered, pouring herself a coffee that had probably been sitting since last night. At 6 o'clock, the doorbell jingled, and the first wave of customers trickled in. Construction workers, cab drivers, a few sleepy office types. Clara greeted them all with the same warm tone, even when their tempers frayed or their jokes landed wrong. She'd learned long ago that kindness wasn't weakness, it was armor. Then he walked in. The man from yesterday. The quiet one with the dark hoodie and sad eyes. He looked like someone who'd been searching for something and hadn't found it yet. He chose the same corner booth. Didn't even glance at the menu. Clara smoothed her apron and walked over. "Back again, huh?" He looked up, surprised she remembered. "Yeah, guess I liked the coffee." She smiled, setting down a fresh cup. "That's the first time anyone's ever said that about this place." He laughed softly. It wasn't a rich man's laugh, measured and polite. It was real, unguarded. She liked the sound of it more than she should have. When she turned to leave, he called after her. "Hey, about yesterday. I'll pay you back." Clara waved a hand dismissively. "Don't worry about it. It was just coffee." "Still," he insisted, "people don't usually do that." She shrugged. Maybe they should. There was something in her tone, quiet, certain, that made him stare. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was just telling the truth. As the morning rush picked up, Clara kept moving, the rhythm of her life unfolding in steps and smiles. But every now and then, she caught him watching her. Not in the way men sometimes did, but like he was trying to figure her out. Like she was a riddle he didn't know how to solve. Outside, sunlight finally broke through the clouds, glinting off the diner's fogged windows. Neither of them knew it yet, but one cup of coffee had already started changing both their lives. By Thursday morning, the city had sunk into a grey drizzle that blurred every reflection. The Morning Star Diner looked softer in the rain, its neon glow bleeding across wet pavement like watercolor. Clara wiped the same table for the 3rd time, more out of habit than need. Her mind was somewhere else, on the unpaid power bill, on the prescription she couldn't afford, on her dad's cough that seemed worse every night. Then the doorbell jingled. He was back. The quiet man in the grey hoodie. His jeans were still faded, but his face looked a little less tired, as if the diner had become a place he could breathe. He sat in the same corner booth, right under the flickering G in the sign. Clara caught herself smiling before she could stop it. "Morning again," she said, grabbing the pot of coffee. "You must really love our $5 blend." He chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm starting to think it's the company, not the coffee." Her cheeks warmed, though she hid it behind a polite laugh. "You might be the first person to say something nice about this place all week." "Guess I'm full of surprises," he said, his voice low, almost shy. She poured his coffee, noticing how his hands looked strong but not soft. No rings, no watch, just calloused fingers. Construction worker, maybe. Or mechanic. Either way, not the kind of man who belonged to shiny offices and marble floors. He glanced at her name tag. Clara. That's a pretty name. Thanks. My mom picked it. Said it sounded like light. He smiled. Does she still say things like that? Clara's hands stilled. No. She passed away when I was 15. Silence settled between them, quiet but comfortable. Liam studied her, the way grief hadn't hardened her but somehow made her gentler. I'm sorry, he said softly. For what it's worth, she picked right. Clara blinked fast and looked away. You're not from around here, are you? Guess not, he admitted. I've been trying to figure some things out. She smirked. What kind of things? Whether people are as bad as I think they are. That caught her off guard. You don't strike me as a pessimist. He gave a half smile. You'd be surprised. The cook yelled an order, breaking the moment. Clara moved to grab a tray of pancakes for table 6, balancing it with the practiced grace of someone who'd been doing this forever. She passed Liam's table again, her ponytail swinging lightly as she moved. He couldn't stop watching her. Every customer he'd met in his real life, every boardroom handshake, every fake smile, flashed in his mind. None of them had looked at him the way she did, like she was seeing the person, not the price tag. Half an hour later, a man in a slick suit walked in, phone glued to his ear. He brushed past Clara without apology, barking orders to whoever was on the other end. When she brought his order, he snapped, This coffee's cold. Get it right this time. Liam's jaw tightened. Clara didn't flinch. She just replaced the cup, poured a new one, and said with quiet grace, Sorry about that, sir. Fresh pot. The man didn't thank her, didn't even look up, but she smiled anyway. When she returned to Liam's booth, he asked, Why do you let people talk to you like that? She shrugged. Because anger's expensive. I can't afford it. That line hit him harder than he expected. Simple, honest, devastating. Outside, thunder rolled over the rooftops. Liam stirred his coffee, his reflection rippling in the dark surface. He'd come to the diner to test someone's heart, but it was his that was starting to fail the test. And as the storm built outside, something deeper was brewing inside both of them. Friday mornings were always chaos. The Morning Star diner overflowed with commuters clutching to-go cups and construction crews ordering stacks of pancakes before work. Clara moved between tables like clockwork, smiling, refilling, apologizing, surviving. Liam sat in his usual corner, the hood of his grey sweatshirt pulled low. He liked watching her work, though he didn't quite understand why. Maybe it was the calm she carried through the noise. Or maybe it was how she treated everyone like they mattered, even when they didn't deserve it. He'd told himself this was still part of the test. That's what it had started as, a social experiment, not an emotional one. But every day he spent here made it harder to remember that. Morning, Clara said, sliding his coffee across the table. You're starting to look like a regular. Guess I'm addicted, he replied, stirring the sugar though he never used any. To caffeine or bad diner food? Maybe the service, he said, eyes lifting just long enough to see her blush. She shook her head, laughing softly. You're trouble, I can tell. He smiled but didn't answer. Then after a pause, he reached for his wallet and frowned. That's weird, he muttered. Clara noticed. Everything okay? He patted his pockets, pretending confusion. I must have left my wallet at the apartment. Great. She shrugged. No big deal. You can pay next time. He blinked. You don't even know me. I know you drink your coffee black. Tip when you can. And don't make a mess, she said simply. That's enough. He leaned back, testing her. What if I never come back? Then I'll be out $3, she said, grabbing the empty plate from the next booth. Could be worse. Her tone was casual, but her words hit him like a quiet sermon. He'd built his entire life on suspicion, on contracts and clauses, on never trusting without proof. And here she was, risking the only thing she had, her paycheck, on faith. Liam watched her walk away, the faint scent of coffee and vanilla following her. He wasn't used to people giving without expecting something back. In his world, generosity came with strings. He sat there for a long moment, turning the empty cup in his hands. Finally, he stood, pretending to leave. But instead of walking out, he slipped a $100 bill under the saucer and quietly disappeared into the rain. When Clara cleared the table, she found it. Her breath caught. For a second, her pride wanted to tear it in half. But then she saw the note written in neat handwriting. For the coffee, for your kindness, don't argue. Her throat tightened. She tucked the bill into her apron, but made a silent promise. She'd pay it forward, somehow. That evening, after her shift, Clara stopped by the pharmacy. Her father's medicine was waiting behind the counter, as always, but the total still made her wince. She handed over the money anyway, clutching the paper bag like it was fragile glass. Back at the apartment, her dad looked up from his chair. "Good day." "Better than most," she said, sitting beside him. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped, and somewhere across the city, Liam watched the same storm from his rented apartment, wondering what the hell he was doing. He'd come here to test people, to see if anyone's kindness was real. But now, as he thought about Clara's easy smile and those words, "Then I'll be out $3," he realized something unsettling. She wasn't the one being tested anymore. He was. Saturday hit the city like a sigh. Grey skies, wet sidewalks, and the smell of old rain hanging in the air. The Morning Star diner was half empty, the regulars nursing hangovers and quiet regrets. Clara wiped down the counter, humming to herself as the doorbell jingled. It was him again. Same hoodie, same thoughtful eyes. But today, he looked heavier somehow, like something invisible was sitting on his shoulders. "Morning," she said, her tone light. "Let me guess, coffee black?" "Guess you know me too well," he said, sliding into the corner booth. "Careful," she teased, pouring his cup. "I start remembering orders. People think I'm psychic." He smiled faintly, but the warmth didn't reach his eyes. She noticed. "You okay?" "Yeah, just one of those days." He hesitated, then added, "I might be out of cash again." Clara froze mid-step. "You're kidding, right?" He shook his head, managing a sheepish grin. "Forgot my wallet." Again. "You probably think I'm the worst customer in New York." She sighed, setting down the pot. "Well, you're not the best." "Want me to wash dishes or something?" he joked, trying to cut the tension. Clara laughed softly. "Nah, we're already short on plates." She reached into her apron and pulled out a few crumpled bills, her tip money from the morning shift. "Here, don't worry about it." He frowned. "You can't keep doing that." "It's just coffee," she said, sliding the money toward the register. "Besides, you look like you need it more than me." The line hit him hard. He wanted to tell her the truth, that he could buy this whole diner 10 times over, that her kindness didn't need to stretch this far. But he stayed quiet, watching her move around the room with a quiet dignity that made him ache. At the counter, the manager, Tom, eyed the exchange suspiciously. "Clara," he barked, "you paying customers' tabs again?" She turned, startled. "It's fine, Tom. Just coffee." He scowled. "It's not fine. You know policy. You're not a charity." Liam's jaw clenched. "Hey, it was my mistake," Tom cut him off. "Then you can finish your drink somewhere else." The diner went silent. The few customers looked up from their plates. Clara's face flushed. "Please, Tom, it's not a big deal." "It's theft if the drawer's short," he snapped. "You like this job? Then stop playing hero." Liam stood, his temper flaring. "She's not the problem. I am." But Clara quickly stepped between them. "It's okay. Really. I'll fix it." She grabbed a few extra dollars from her apron, dropped them into the till, and turned back to him with a shaky smile. "There. Problem solved." Tom muttered something under his breath and stormed into the kitchen. The tension broke, leaving behind an awkward quiet. "You shouldn't have done that," Liam said softly. Yeah, well, she replied, you shouldn't keep forgetting your wallet. He tried to smile, but guilt gnawed at him. You didn't have to cover me. I didn't do it for you, she said, meeting his eyes. I did it because I know what it feels like to be short on something. Money, time, luck, doesn't matter which. It's all the same kind of hard. He couldn't look away. Her words weren't poetic, but they were true. Brutally true. When she walked off to refill another cup, Liam sat back and exhaled. This wasn't just a kindness test anymore. He was watching someone give pieces of herself to a world that didn't deserve her, and realizing he might be the one least deserving of all. And for the first time in years, the billionaire who had everything wished he could give something real in return. Sunday came with a quiet chill that made the city seem slower, softer. The Morning Star diner was calm, the kind of calm that felt like holding your breath. Liam sat in his usual booth, nursing his coffee, pretending to be another man again. The truth of who he really was, Liam Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Industries, net worth $6.4 billion, was buried under the hoodie and stubble. He wasn't supposed to feel anything during this test. It was supposed to be data, human behavior, stripped of status. But Clara had changed that. He watched her move behind the counter, balancing plates with the ease of someone who'd done this dance for too long. There was something beautiful in the way she carried exhaustion without letting it dim her kindness. Morning, she said, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. You look better today. Guess your coffee's working. Then I'll put it on the menu as a miracle cure, she joked. Liam smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He wanted to tell her who he really was. Just say it, rip off the disguise. But the thought of what that truth would do to her kindness stopped him cold. She was genuine because she thought he was ordinary. Once the illusion broke, everything good about this connection would vanish. He'd spent years surrounded by people who smiled at his money. Not at him. Clara was the first person who smiled for real. The bell above the door jingled, snapping the moment in half. A tall man in a tailored coat entered, his voice sharp and commanding. Liam Hartwell. Clara froze mid-step. The name hung in the air like thunder waiting to break. Liam's stomach dropped. The man continued, Sir, your driver's been waiting outside for 20 minutes. You really shouldn't be here alone. Every head in the diner turned. The whispers started instantly. Wait, Hartwell? Like the billionaire? Someone murmured. Clara stared, eyes wide, her face pale. You're him! He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The silence between them hurt worse than anything he'd ever bought or lost. The driver looked uncomfortable, realizing too late that he'd just detonated a bomb. Apologies, sir. The board meeting. Liam waved him off. Go wait outside. But the damage was done. The room felt smaller now, colder. Clara took a step back, her voice barely above a whisper. So, all that talk about being broke? About forgetting your wallet? It wasn't a lie, he said quietly. Not exactly. Her laugh was hollow. Not exactly. You let me pay for your coffee. You let me argue with my boss. You made me look like a fool in front of everyone. Clara, I was trying to. To what? Her voice cracked. Test me? See if the waitress had a soul? He flinched. The truth landed harder than any accusation she could have thrown. I wanted to see if kindness still existed in the world, he said, almost pleading. You proved it does. She shook her head, eyes glistening. No, Liam. You don't test kindness. You live it. He took a step closer. But she turned away, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. You should go, she whispered. He hesitated, then placed a folded envelope on the counter. For your dad's medicine, he said softly. Please. But when she looked back, the door was already closing behind him. Clara stood there, heart pounding, staring at the untouched envelope. Around her, the diner buzzed with low murmurs. She didn't care. Slowly, she opened it. Inside wasn't cash, just a note, handwritten in clean, careful script. "You reminded me what money can't buy." Her throat tightened. The kindness she'd given him had been real. His apology, she realized, might be too. But the question now was, could she ever forgive him? The next 2 days passed like ghosts through Clara's life. She moved through her shifts on autopilot, smiling when she had to, laughing when it was expected, all while her mind replayed the same scene over and over. Liam Hartwell, billionaire. Liar. She'd Googled him that night, of course. The search results were endless. Photos of him in tuxedos, shaking hands with presidents, attending galas, standing beside supermodels. And she had paid for his $3 coffee. By Tuesday morning, exhaustion had hardened into something colder. She'd made peace with disappointment before, but this felt different. This was humiliation wearing the mask of betrayal. It was a slow morning at the Morning Star diner. The rain had stopped, sunlight leaking through the fogged windows. Clara stood behind the counter, refilling salt shakers, trying not to think about him. The bell above the door jingled. Her stomach tightened, instinctively expecting him. But it wasn't Liam. It was an older woman, dressed in an elegant beige coat, her silver hair perfectly styled. She looked out of place among the cracked tiles and faded menus. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice smooth and refined. "Is this seat taken?" Clara blinked. "No, ma'am. Please, anywhere you like." The woman chose Liam's usual booth. A chill ran through Clara's chest. She poured coffee automatically, approaching with a polite smile. "Here you go. Fresh pot." "Thank you," the woman said. Her eyes, sharp, intelligent, studied Clara for a long moment. "You're Clara Monroe, correct?" Clara froze, the coffee pot trembling slightly in her hand. How do you know my name?" The woman smiled faintly. "Liam told me about you." The world tilted. "You know him?" "I'm his mother." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Clara nearly set the pot down too fast, catching it mid-fall. "His mother?" "Yes," the woman said calmly. "Margaret Hartwell. Liam's been out of sorts lately. He mentioned a young woman who made him see things differently. I was curious." Clara swallowed hard. "If you came here to apologize for him, you don't need to." Margaret's smile didn't waver. "I didn't. My son doesn't deserve to be defended right now. But he is trying to fix what he broke." Clara crossed her arms, defensive. "He lied. That's not something you fix with flowers and an apology." Margaret nodded, her expression softening. "He told me what he did. He's ashamed of it. But Clara, what you showed him wasn't just kindness. It was dignity. You gave my son something money never could. A mirror." Clara stared, unsure how to respond. Her throat felt tight again, that same old ache creeping in. "He tested me like some experiment," she said bitterly. "And you think I should feel proud about that?" Margaret's gaze held hers. "No. I think you should know that your reaction changed him. The Liam I raised was brilliant, but he's spent years living like the world owed him something. For the first time, he realized how much he owes it." Silence hung between them. The diner's low hum faded into nothing. Finally, Clara said quietly, "He made me feel small." Margaret's eyes softened. And yet somehow, he walked away feeling smaller. Clara let out a shaky breath. If he wants forgiveness, he's not going to find it here. "I didn't come for forgiveness," Margaret said gently, reaching into her purse. "I came to return this." She placed a small velvet pouch on the table. Clara hesitated, then opened it. Inside was the envelope Liam had left, the same one she'd thrown in the trash 2 days ago. "He asked me to make sure you read what's inside," Margaret said softly. "The letter, not the check." Clara blinked. "There's a letter?" Margaret stood, her elegant hands smoothing her coat. "You'll find it when you're ready." Then she smiled one last time, a sad, knowing smile, and left the diner. Clara sat alone at the booth, the pouch resting in her hands, her heart pounding. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, the story between her and Liam wasn't over yet. That night, the city breathed in shadows and neon, and Clara Monroe trudged up the cracked staircase to her apartment, the velvet pouch heavy in her coat pocket. She hadn't opened it yet. She didn't trust what might spill out. Money, apologies, or worse, hope. Her key stuck in the lock again. She jiggled it until it gave way, stepping inside the dim one-bedroom space that smelled faintly of coffee grounds and disinfectant. The faint hum of the oxygen machine filled the air. Her father sat by the window, his frail hands folded in his lap, staring at the city's flickering skyline. "Hey, Dad," she said softly, forcing a smile. "You're up late?" "Couldn't sleep." He looked up, his voice dry as paper. "You working too hard again?" She shrugged, hanging her coat. "It's called surviving." He chuckled weakly. "You always were stubborn." She poured him a glass of water, setting it on the small table beside his chair. "How was your day?" "Oh, you know. Same old view, same old lungs," he said with a raspy grin. "How was yours?" Clara hesitated, debating how much truth he could handle. "Long," she said finally. He gave her a knowing look. "Long or complicated?" She smirked. "Since when did you start reading minds?" He leaned back, the oxygen tube shifting slightly. "Since I saw that look on your face. The one that says someone did something stupid and you can't decide whether to hate them or forgive them." She blinked, caught off guard. "That obvious, huh?" He smiled faintly. "Honey, I raised you. You think I don't recognize heartbreak when I see it?" Clara dropped onto the couch, pulling the velvet pouch from her pocket. She turned it over in her hands, the soft fabric whispering against her palms. "Someone gave me this today," she said quietly. "Well, his mother did." Her father frowned. "Whose mother?" "Liam Hartwell's." The name hung in the room like smoke. Dean Monroe coughed softly. "Wait, the billionaire? The one who was pretending to be broke?" "Yeah, that one." He let out a low whistle. "And she just showed up at the diner?" "She said he told her about me. Said I changed him." Clara gave a humorless laugh. "Guess that's his family's version of damage control." Her father studied her face. "You think that's all it was? What else could it be? I was just a story for him. Some poor waitress who made a nice moral lesson." He looked at her for a long moment. "You don't sound convinced." Clara didn't answer. She finally untied the pouch and slid out the envelope. Inside was the check she remembered, but folded within it was something else. A single handwritten letter on thick paper. Her breath caught. She unfolded it slowly. "Clara, I started this as a test. I wanted to prove that kindness was extinct. You proved I was wrong. I made you part of my lie, and for that, I can never undo the damage. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you'll believe this. I saw you. Not the uniform, not the struggle, you. And you reminded me that the world isn't as cold as I've been." "Liam." The words blurred as her eyes filled. She wiped them quickly, angry at herself for caring. Her father's voice was gentle. "Seems like the guy's sorry." "Yeah," she whispered, "but sorry doesn't erase what he did." "No," he said quietly. "But sometimes it's a start." She folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. The check remained untouched. She couldn't take his money. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. The city never stopped, never slept, and neither did her thoughts. She looked at her father, his breathing steady, the glow from the oxygen machine washing the room in pale blue light. She didn't know it yet, but forgiveness wasn't something he'd have to earn in words. It would have to be proven in action. And that test hadn't even begun. The diner's bell jingled on Wednesday afternoon. and for the first time in days, Clara didn't look up right away. She was busy balancing a tray of coffee cups, pretending her hands weren't shaking from exhaustion. Rent was due in 2 days, her father's medication refill was waiting at the pharmacy, and her tips barely covered yesterday's groceries. Life, it seemed, had no pause button, but when she finally glanced toward the door, the world narrowed to a single shape: Liam Hartwell, standing in the doorway. No hoodie this time, no disguise. Just him. He wore a dark coat, simple but perfectly tailored, his expression cautious, almost nervous. The customers didn't seem to notice, but Clara's heart did a painful little twist. She set down the tray, her voice steady. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he said softly, "but I had to be." "You made your point, Liam. The test's over. Congratulations, you found one decent waitress in New York." "That's not why I'm here," he said. "I didn't come for a test. I came for you." She forced a bitter smile. "You really think that line's gonna work here?" He took a breath, glancing around the diner, then lowered his voice. "Can we talk? Please?" Rita, the cook, shot her a curious look from behind the counter. Clara hesitated, then nodded toward an empty booth near the window. 5 minutes, she said flatly. Liam sat across from her, his hands clasped together. "I read your note," she began, before he could speak. "I read every word, and it doesn't change anything." He nodded. "I didn't expect it to, but I needed you to know I meant it." "Why?" she asked. "You've got a whole world full of people who'll smile and tell you what you want to hear. Why me?" "Because you didn't," he said simply. "You treated me like a person when you thought I had nothing. Do you know how rare that is?" Clara leaned back, her arms crossed. "I didn't do it for you, Liam. I did it because it was right." "That's what makes what you did worse. You turned something decent into an experiment." He winced, his voice soft. "I know. I've spent my whole life thinking everyone wanted something from me. Money, status, attention. I forgot what it looked like when someone gives without expecting anything back." Her eyes softened for a brief moment, then hardened again. "You're still doing it, turning this into a speech. You don't have to justify yourself to me." He looked down at the table, then quietly slid a folded paper toward her. "This isn't money," he said quickly when she frowned. "It's a lease for your apartment. Paid off for the next year." She froze. "You had no right." "I didn't sign it," he interrupted. "It's in your name. You can tear it up if you want. I just wanted to make sure your dad could breathe without you worrying about rent every night." Her throat tightened. "You think throwing money fixes everything?" "No," he said quietly. "But maybe it can buy you a little peace while I try to make things right." Clara didn't answer. She just stared at the paper, her heart warring with her pride. He stood slowly. "You don't have to forgive me. You don't even have to see me again. But I'm not walking away this time. Not until I've earned back the right to look you in the eye." She stayed silent, but something inside her cracked, just slightly. He walked out into the cold afternoon, leaving the folded lease behind on the table. The bell above the door chimed softly as it closed. Clara stared at it for a long time, then whispered under her breath, "What are you doing to me, Liam Hartwell?" And though she didn't admit it yet, a part of her already knew. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a different kind of test. Thursday night came wrapped in thunder. The rain hit the city like a confession, washing the streets clean of everything but memory. The Morning Star diner was nearly empty, its neon sign flickering through the downpour. Inside, the world smelled of wet coats, burnt coffee, and quiet exhaustion. Clara wiped down the counter, glancing out the window every few minutes. She told herself she wasn't waiting for him, but she was. Ever since Liam's visit, her mind refused to rest. Every word he'd said played in loops, echoing in her chest like a song she couldn't turn off. By 8 o'clock, the door opened. He stepped in, dripping rainwater onto the tile, his hair plastered to his forehead. No bodyguards, No suits, no arrogance. Just him. "You're soaked," she said before she could stop herself. He smiled faintly. "Guess I underestimated New York weather." She sighed, grabbing a towel from behind the counter and tossing it at him. "You're lucky I keep extras for people who forget umbrellas. Guess I'm one of those people." He took the towel, drying his hair clumsily. "Coffee?" she asked, already reaching for the pot. "Only if it's yours," he said quietly. She rolled her eyes, but her lips twitched. "Flattery doesn't work here." "Then I'll take honesty instead," he said, sliding into his usual booth. For a while, neither of them spoke. The rain outside was relentless, filling the silence with its rhythm. Finally, Clara broke it. "Why are you here, Liam? Really?" He looked out the window, then back at her. "Because I can't stop thinking about what you said. About not testing kindness, but living it." She folded her arms. "You don't have to quote me." "I'm not," he said softly. "I'm trying to understand you. You spend your days serving people who barely notice you, and somehow you still see the best in them. How do you do that?" Clara exhaled slowly. "Because someone has to. If we all start giving up on each other, what's left?" He nodded, letting her words sink in. "You sound like someone who's been hurt and still chose to be kind anyway." She looked away. "Everyone's been hurt, Liam. The difference is whether you let it make you bitter or better." He smiled faintly. "You ever think about how strange it is that we met at all?" "Every day," she admitted quietly. "Sometimes I wish we hadn't." "That's fair," he said, his tone gentle. "But I don't." The thunder cracked, making the diner windows rattle. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied again. Clara sighed. "If the power goes out, you're helping me light candles." He grinned. "Deal." For a few minutes, they just sat there in silence. Two people who had no business being in each other's lives, yet somehow fit in the same frame. Liam finally spoke again. "You said something the day I met you, about kindness being rebellion. I've been thinking about that." She chuckled softly. "That's because it's true. The world's mean enough as it is. Being kind isn't weakness. It's defiance." He leaned forward, his voice quiet. "Then maybe I want to learn how to rebel." Her gaze met his, and for the first time in days, she didn't see the billionaire or the liar. Just a man trying to start over. "You can start," she said, "by leaving a decent tip." He laughed, the sound warm and real. "Done." Lightning flared outside, painting their faces in flashes of white and gold. For a heartbeat, everything felt suspended. No lies, no guilt, no tests. Just two souls, sitting across from each other, while the storm raged on. And when Clara finally turned to refill his cup, she didn't notice the tiny smile forming on her lips. Because for the first time since it all began, she didn't feel angry anymore. She felt alive. The rain hadn't stopped by Friday night, but it didn't matter. The diner was packed. Steam rose from the grill, dishes clattered, and conversations blended into a dull hum. Clara moved through it all like a ghost, her smile automatic but distant. Ever since that quiet, storm-soaked evening with Liam, she'd been fighting something she didn't want to name. Hope. He hadn't come back in 2 days. She told herself she was relieved, that silence was easier than confusion. But deep down, she missed him. Missed the way he listened, the way he made her laugh without even trying. Then, just as she turned to grab an order, a familiar voice behind her said, "You really should wear waterproof shoes in this weather." She froze. Her heart jumped. When she turned, Liam was standing there again, this time dry, dressed in a dark blazer and jeans, looking almost normal. Almost. "You have terrible timing," she said, trying to sound annoyed. He smiled. "Then I'm consistent." "What are you doing here?" "Actually," he said, holding out a small envelope, "I came to give you this." She hesitated before taking it. "If there's money inside, I swear." "It's not," he said quickly. "Promise." Inside the envelope was a single invitation card, embossed with gold lettering. Art for Humanity. Charity Gala, hosted by the Hartwell Foundation. She stared at it. You've got to be kidding me. It's tomorrow night, he said. Black tie, lots of donors, overpriced champagne. The works. Her eyes narrowed. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to come with me. She let out a short laugh. Right. Me, a diner waitress, at a billionaire charity gala. He met her gaze, his tone soft but firm. Clara, I'm not inviting you as a waitress. I'm inviting you as the person who changed how I see the world. Her defenses wavered. You realize how insane that sounds? Probably, he admitted. But it's true. Rita called from the kitchen. Table 4's ready. Clara turned to grab the tray, grateful for the interruption. But before she walked off, she said quietly, I don't belong in your world, Liam. He replied just as softly, Then let me prove that my world doesn't matter. That line stayed in her head the rest of the shift. It haunted her while she washed dishes, counted tips, and later when she sat by her father's bed, watching him sleep. The invitation card lay on the counter beside her, its gold lettering gleaming under the dim lamp. Her father stirred. You've been staring at that card for an hour, he said, voice raspy but amused. She smiled faintly. You should rest. Can't. My daughter's getting invited to fancy parties by billionaires. That's better than TV. Dad, he chuckled, coughing lightly. Go, Clara. You deserve a night where you're not just surviving. She sighed. I wouldn't fit in. Those people live in another universe. Maybe they do, he said, but maybe he's trying to pull you into his for the right reasons. Clara looked down at the card again. For the first time in a long while, she didn't see a wall between their worlds. She saw a door. The next night, as the city shimmered under streetlights, Clara stood in front of a full-length mirror in her small apartment. Her father had found her mother's old dress, a simple navy gown, timeless and elegant despite the years. She adjusted the hem, took a shaky breath, and whispered to her reflection, You can do this. When the knock came, her heart stuttered. She opened the door. Liam stood there, holding a single white rose. He smiled. You look perfect. She took the flower, her voice soft. Don't start with flattery, Mr. Hartwell. Not flattery, he said. Just the truth. And as she stepped into the waiting car, she had no idea that the night ahead would change everything. Again. The gala shimmered like a different planet. Crystal chandeliers threw diamonds of light across marble floors. Violins played somewhere distant, and the air smelled of wealth. Expensive perfume, champagne, and quiet arrogance. Clara felt like she'd stepped into a painting she didn't belong in. Her fingers gripped the clutch bag so tightly, her knuckles whitened. The navy gown her mother once wore fit perfectly, though she felt anything but perfect. Liam stood beside her, effortlessly composed in a black tuxedo. Every head seemed to turn when he entered, every conversation bending subtly toward him. Yet somehow, his focus stayed on her. You okay? He asked softly. Define okay, she whispered, eyes darting to the crowd. Everyone here looks like they were born knowing which fork to use. He chuckled. You'll be fine, just follow my lead. I'm following it straight into a panic attack, she muttered. He smiled, offering his arm. Then I'll be your airbag. Despite herself, she laughed. For a while, the fear melted. He introduced her to donors, board members, artists, people with smiles so polished they almost reflected light. Yet she handled it with grace. Her warmth, her sincerity, her simple honesty made her stand out like color in a room full of glass. At one point, an older woman in pearls leaned close to Liam. She's charming, she said approvingly. Not what I expected from you, Mr. Hartwell. Liam smiled. That's kind of the point. But not everyone was as gracious. Halfway through the evening, near the champagne fountain, a tall man in a navy suit joined them. His name was Charles Danning, a fellow executive and, by the look in his eyes, someone who didn't appreciate Liam's happiness. "Well, well," Charles drawled. "Hartwell finally brought company, and here I was, thinking you'd sworn off real people." Liam's smile tightened. "Charles." Clara extended a polite hand. "Nice to meet you." Charles shook it with mock politeness. "A pleasure. So tell me, Miss Monroe." He raised a brow. "Monroe. Lovely. And what do you do, Miss Monroe?" "She's a friend," Liam interjected quickly, but Clara answered honestly. "I'm a waitress." The man's grin sharpened. "A waitress? Fascinating. You're certainly braver than I thought, Liam. Most men would stick to their own social tier." Liam's voice cooled. "Watch yourself." "Oh, relax," Charles laughed. "Just making conversation, though I must say it's impressive you found someone untouched by the world you own. How noble." Clara's chest tightened, heat flooding her face. Liam started to speak, but before he could, another voice cut through the noise. "Liam Hartwell!" The room hushed slightly as a silver-haired investor clapped him on the shoulder. "You missed the last board meeting, my boy. We were starting to worry you'd gone rogue." Liam forced a smile. "Just taking a break from business tonight." "Ah, yes," the man said, his gaze flicking toward Clara. "Rebranding the Hartwell image, I see. Clever. After that whole experiment video scandal, I suppose this human interest story will help." The blood drained from Clara's face. "Video?" she whispered. Liam froze. Charles smirked. "You didn't tell her?" "What video?" Clara's voice shook now. Liam's throat tightened. "Clara, She stepped back, eyes wide. "You filmed me?" "No, not me. My assistant. It wasn't supposed to go public." Her voice cracked, loud enough to draw stares. "So this whole thing was content? A charity experiment for your image? Clara, please, listen." But she was already walking away, the crowd parting around her like water. "Clara!" he called after her. But she didn't turn back. She reached the exit, pushing through the glass doors into the night. Rain poured down, cold and merciless, drenching her gown. Inside, Liam stood frozen, surrounded by whispers, his perfect world cracking under the weight of truth. And outside, under the relentless rain, Clara finally realized this wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation in front of the whole world. The video hit the internet like wildfire. By Sunday morning, every gossip site and business news outlet had the same headline: "Billionaire's kindness experiment backfires. Waitress unknowingly becomes viral sensation." Clara woke to her phone buzzing non-stop. Messages, calls, notifications. People she hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about her life. Her face was everywhere. Screenshots from diner security footage. Edited clips of her smiling, laughing, paying for Liam's coffee. Headlines called her the innocent waitress who passed the billionaire test. Others mocked her as the gullible girl who didn't know she was being played. She sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling, trying to breathe through the noise. Her father's voice came from the other room, hoarse and worried. "Clara? You okay, honey?" She couldn't answer. She didn't know. Her boss, Tom, called 10 minutes later. She let it ring twice before answering. "Clara, we need to talk." Her stomach dropped. "Please don't say it." He sighed. "You brought too much attention to the diner. People are calling non-stop, reporters showing up, blocking the entrance. The owner's furious. We can't have this kind of publicity." "So I'm fired," she whispered. "It's not personal," he said awkwardly. "You're a good worker. But this is a circus. I'm sorry." The line went dead. She sat there in silence, the phone slipping from her hand. The bills on the counter blurred behind her tears. Rent, medicine, groceries. Life didn't stop for heartbreak. It just kept collecting late fees. By afternoon, news vans were parked outside her building. A reporter yelled up toward her window. "Clara, did you know you were being recorded?" She closed the blinds, trembling. The knock on the door that evening nearly made her jump out of her skin. "Go away," she called. "Clara, please, it's me." Her chest tightened at the sound of his voice. She opened the door just enough to see him. Liam, standing in the hallway, looking exhausted, rain-soaked, and utterly human. He wasn't the man from the videos or the headlines. He looked broken. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice shaking. "You've done enough." "Clara, I didn't leak the footage," he said quickly. "My assistant uploaded it for internal review. It was never meant for public eyes. Someone from the PR department found it and thought it would boost the company image. I shut it down as soon as I saw it." "You shut it down?" She laughed bitterly. "After millions of people saw me treated like an exhibit?" He winced. "You're right. I failed you. I failed the point of the whole thing." "The point?" Her voice rose. "You made my life into a lesson. I lost my job, Liam. People think I was part of your stupid game." "I'll fix it," he said, desperate. "I'll go public. I'll tell them it was my fault, that you didn't know." "And then what?" she snapped. "You think that'll erase it? You think I can walk into another diner and not have people whisper about the Billionaire's experiment girl?" He looked down, rain dripping from his hair. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "But it did," she whispered. "And the worst part? I actually believed you changed." Her words hit him harder than any headline ever could. He wanted to speak, to explain, but the look in her eyes, disappointment mixed with heartbreak, stopped him cold. She closed the door slowly, her final words soft but sharp. "Go fix your image somewhere else, Liam. You can't fix me." He stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the door she'd just shut. Cameras flashed from down the hall, reporters whispering his name. He didn't move. For the first time in his life, Liam Hartwell realized that all the power in the world couldn't silence the sound of a door closing on truth. Liam Hartwell didn't sleep for 3 nights. His penthouse, once a symbol of control and success, felt like a glass cage now, echoing with silence and regret. The city stretched out beneath him, lights flickering like a pulse he couldn't steady. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Clara, her trembling hands, her tear-streaked face, the door closing between them. He'd built empires out of strategy and precision, but for the first time, he was lost without a map. His assistant, Evan, stood awkwardly in the living room, clutching a tablet. "The company's PR team is panicking. The video's everywhere. They want a response by morning." "Pull it down," Liam said flatly. "It's been re-uploaded thousands of times. Once it hit social media, it was over." Liam's jaw clenched. "Then we changed the story." Evan hesitated. "They're suggesting we spin it. Say it was a social experiment in empathy, something for charity. The public might—" "No." Liam's voice was sharp enough to cut. "No more lies." Evan nodded, retreating toward the door. "What should I tell them?" "Tell them I'll handle it myself." When the door shut, Liam exhaled and sank onto the couch, head in his hands. The city roared outside. Sirens, horns, life moving on without him. He didn't deserve peace, not while Clara's life was burning because of his arrogance. The next morning, he walked into the headquarters of Hartwell Industries. No chauffeur, no entourage. Reporters swarmed the entrance, shouting questions. Cameras flashed like lightning. "Mr. Hartwell, was the waitress aware of the experiment? Do you plan to compensate her for damages? Was this all part of your new brand campaign?" He didn't answer a single word. Inside the boardroom, every executive stared as he entered. He looked nothing like their immaculate CEO, dark circles under his eyes, collar open, no tie. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, "I'm resigning effective immediately." A stunned silence followed. One of the directors stammered, "Liam, be reasonable. We can weather this scandal." "I'm not interested in weathering it," he interrupted. "I built this company on the idea that everything has a price. Turns out some things don't. Not decency, not trust, not her." He placed a signed resignation letter on the table. "I'm done." The room erupted. Arguments, protests, panic. But Liam didn't stay to hear them. He walked out, leaving behind the skyscraper that had defined his life. He spent the next few days searching for Clara. He called the diner. No answer. He stopped by her apartment building, only to find the landlord shaking his head. She moved out 2 days ago. Didn't leave a forwarding address. He checked hospitals, community centers, anywhere she might have gone. Nothing. It was as if she'd vanished. By the 4th day, he found himself standing outside the old diner again. The sign was dark, closed for renovation. Rain began to fall, slow and cold. He stood there until his hair dripped into his collar, staring through the glass at the empty seats where everything had started. Then his phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. If you really want to make things right, stop looking for me. Do something that matters. He stared at the screen for a long moment. Then slowly, he smiled through the exhaustion. She was right. Again. That night, Liam called his mother. I'm liquidating 30% of my holdings, he told her. I want to start a foundation for small businesses, for working-class families, for people like her. Margaret's voice softened on the other end. You think that'll bring her back? No, he said quietly. But maybe it'll bring me closer to the person she thought I could be. And for the first time, Liam Hartwell didn't want redemption in headlines. He wanted it in silence, in the work, in becoming someone worthy of forgiveness. Hospitals always smelled the same, sterile, cold, and faintly metallic. Clara had grown used to it. She'd spent enough nights in waiting rooms that the beeping of heart monitors had become part of her soundtrack. But this time was worse. Her father's condition had taken a sudden turn, the doctor saying words like infection and complications that made her heart clench. She sat by his bed, fingers wrapped around his fragile hand. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale beneath the fluorescent light. Hey, she whispered. You're supposed to be the strong one, remember? Dean Monroe smiled weakly, his voice barely a whisper. Guess I'm taking a day off. She forced a small laugh, but her eyes stung. Don't joke, the doctor says you'll be fine after another round of antibiotics. Antibiotics cost money, don't they? He murmured. Clara's throat tightened. Don't worry about that. I'll figure it out. He studied her for a moment, the corners of his mouth lifting. You've been saying that your whole life, kid. She smiled, blinking back tears. And it's been true every time. Outside, the evening light dimmed into that grey-blue haze between day and night. The sound of rain against the window blended with the hum of machines. She reached into her bag for the envelope she'd kept sealed for weeks, the one with Liam's check and his letter. She stared at it. She'd refused to cash it, refused to even look at it most days. It represented everything she didn't want to be, someone who needed saving. But now, her father's hand trembled in hers, and the truth pressed down heavy on her chest. Pride didn't pay hospital bills. A soft knock pulled her out of thought. She turned, frowning. Visiting hours are over, the nurse said gently. Before Clara could respond, another voice came from behind the nurse. Please, just for a minute. Her heart stopped. Liam stood there in the doorway, rain clinging to his coat, his hair damp, his expression tired but calm. The nurse looked at Clara for permission. She hesitated, then nodded slightly. He stepped inside, holding something in his hand, an envelope, thicker than the first. I heard, he said quietly, about your dad. She looked away. How? I've been following up with the hospital charity program. Your name came up. I told you not to look for me. I wasn't looking, he said softly. I was helping. Clara exhaled sharply. You don't get it, Liam. I don't need your guilt money. This isn't guilt, he said, his voice trembling slightly. This is me doing something that matters. Because you were right. Words don't fix anything. Actions do. Her father stirred faintly. Is that him? Clara turned to her father. Yeah, the billionaire who doesn't listen. Dean chuckled weakly. He looks more human than I expected. Liam smiled sadly. Sir, I owe your daughter more than I can say. Dean's eyes softened. Then don't say it. Just take care of her. When I can't. Dad, Clara whispered, tears spilling now. He gave her hand a squeeze. Don't fight goodness just because it hurts to need it. The room went silent again, broken only by the rhythm of machines. Liam placed the envelope gently on the bedside table. This will cover everything, treatment, rent, whatever you need, no strings, no attention, just help. She stared at it, torn between gratitude and resentment. Why can't you just leave me alone? Because walking away once was the biggest mistake of my life, he said, and I won't do it again. He turned to leave, but she called after him, her voice cracking. Liam! He paused. She looked at her father, then back at him. Thank you. He nodded once, quietly, then stepped into the hallway. Clara sat beside her father, the envelope still untouched, and for the first time, she didn't see it as charity, but as a lifeline thrown from someone drowning, just like her. The next morning broke quietly. No alarms, no beeping machines, just a thin sliver of sunlight cutting through the blinds. Clara had fallen asleep in the hospital chair, her hand still wrapped around her father's. When she woke, a nurse was checking his vitals. He's stable, the nurse said softly. The antibiotics are working. Relief flooded her chest like oxygen. She smiled weakly. Thank you. The nurse nodded and left. Clara turned back to her father, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. He was sleeping peacefully, his breathing stronger. For the first time in weeks, she felt hope flicker again. Then she saw it, the envelope on the table, the one Liam had left the night before. She'd promised herself she wouldn't touch it, but now it felt like it was calling to her. She opened it slowly. Inside were hospital payment receipts, already cleared. Every cent covered. No publicity, no signatures, no checks to cash. Just quiet action, and beneath the receipts, a single note. I didn't do this to fix what I broke. I did it because you taught me how to care. L. Her throat tightened. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Liam stood at the door again, dressed simply in jeans and a black coat. No entourage, no cameras. Just him. I shouldn't have come, he said quietly, but I needed to see for myself that he's okay. He's getting better, she replied. Thanks to you. He shook his head. No, thanks to you. I just followed your example. Clara sighed, crossing her arms. You're good at words, Liam, but that's what got us here in the first place. He took a hesitant step closer. Then let me say the only ones that matter. I'm sorry. She looked up sharply. You already said that. Not like this. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. I started that stupid experiment because I was angry. Angry at everyone who used me, angry at the world. I wanted proof that no one was real anymore. But then you showed up, and everything I believed started to fall apart. Her eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. And when it did, you turned it into content. He winced. I deserved that. Clara shook her head, her anger cracking under the weight of exhaustion. Do you have any idea what it's like to have your life turned into a headline? People at the grocery store whispering, strangers recognizing your face like you're some joke on the internet? Yes, he said quietly. I do now. She frowned. What do you mean? He reached into his coat and handed her his phone. On the screen was a news headline. Liam Hartwell resigns, donates half his fortune to working-class families. She blinked. You really did it? He nodded. Sold my shares. Shut down the PR firm that leaked your video. The rest is going into something called the Monroe Foundation. Her jaw dropped. You named it after me? After what you taught me, he corrected softly. That kindness doesn't need to be performed. It just needs to exist. She looked at him, torn between disbelief and something deeper she didn't want to name. Liam, she said finally, I don't know if I can forgive you. I'm not asking you to, he said, voice breaking. I just want the chance to prove that I'm not the man who walked into your diner pretending to be broke. I want to be the man who finally learned what wealth really means. Silence stretched between them. The monitor beeped softly in rhythm with her father's heart. Clara stood, walked past him to the window, and stared out at the sunlight spilling across the parking lot. Actions, not words, she said at last. He nodded. Then I'll start today. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable, and though she didn't say it, for the first time, she believed maybe, just maybe, he already had. The storm outside had finally cleared. But inside Liam's world, the wreckage was only beginning. His resignation sent shockwaves through Wall Street, his name plastered across every business channel and headline in the country. The empire he had built was unraveling, and for once, he didn't care. He sat alone in his empty office one last time, staring at the city that had once bowed to him. Boxes lined the floor, awards, framed magazine covers, photos from events that now felt like someone else's life. The silence was heavy, almost peaceful. Margaret Hartwell, his mother, stood in the doorway. Her heels clicked softly against the marble. "You really did it," she said quietly. Liam turned, his smile faint. "You always told me I'd burn the whole thing down one day." She sighed, crossing her arms. "I didn't think you'd do it so literally." "I had to," he said. "Every dollar, every deal, it all felt poisoned. I thought I could use money to buy meaning, but it only made me smaller." She studied him for a long moment, then softened. "You think losing everything makes you noble?" He shook his head. "No, it just makes me free." Margaret stepped closer, her tone gentler now. "You're my son, I love you, but you can't live on guilt. You're trying to save the world because you broke one person's heart. That's not redemption. It's punishment." He looked out the window, his voice quiet. "Maybe punishment's what I deserve." She sighed and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then at least make it count." He nodded, eyes distant. "That's the plan." Later that week, Liam stood before a crowd of cameras at a press conference, not as a CEO, but as a man dismantling his own empire. "Effective immediately," he said, his voice steady. "The assets of Hartwell Holdings will be transferred to the Monroe Foundation. It will focus on affordable housing, medical aid, and education for working families." Reporters shouted questions. Flashes lit his face. But he didn't stay for answers. He wasn't here for applause. When he stepped outside, the air felt lighter. He walked past the line of photographers, ignoring the noise, and disappeared into the crowd. For the first time, no one recognized him, and that anonymity felt like grace. He rented a small apartment in Brooklyn, not a penthouse, not a hotel suite, just a real place with creaky floors and a window that overlooked a laundromat. He started volunteering quietly at the foundation offices, helping distribute grants and interview applicants. He worked 12-hour days, often side by side with people who had no idea who he used to be. But even as the weeks passed, one name haunted every quiet moment: Clara. He read about her occasionally in the foundation reports. The board had reached out to her, offering her a position as community coordinator. She'd turned it down. Twice. One night, as he walked home under the soft buzz of streetlights, Liam passed the old Morning Star diner. The place was boarded up, under new management, spray-painted across the windows. He stopped, hands in his pockets, staring at the ghost of where it all began. A taxi splashed through a puddle, breaking his reflection in the glass. He smiled faintly. Maybe that was fitting. Some things had to shatter before they could be rebuilt. His phone buzzed. A text from Evan, his former assistant. "She visited the foundation today, asked about volunteer work. Thought you should know." Liam read the message twice, his heart hammering. Then for the first time in months, he felt a spark of something he hadn't dared to name. Hope. He typed a reply. "Don't tell her I'm involved. If she's coming, Let it be her choice. He slipped his phone back into his pocket and kept walking through the quiet streets. And though he didn't know it yet, the path he was on was already leading him back to the one person who had started his fall and might just be the reason he learned to rise again. Spring came slowly to New York, melting away the frost of winter, one stubborn day at a time. The Morning Star Diner reopened under new ownership, though the neighborhood barely noticed at first. The neon sign still flickered, the tables were still uneven, and the smell of coffee still filled the air. But everything else had changed. Clara Monroe now managed the place. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers, or close enough. The new owner, a non-profit group connected to the Monroe Foundation, had offered her the position after she turned down their first few proposals. "You understand people," the director told her. "You make things work." She'd almost refused again out of pride, but when she learned that the job came with a healthcare plan for her father, she accepted. She told herself it was practicality, not forgiveness. Now, months later, she moved through the diner like she belonged there again. The regulars had returned, the construction workers, the night shift nurses, the tired cab drivers. She greeted each one with the same warm smile that had once caught the attention of a stranger in a grey hoodie. She never said his name anymore, but he lived quietly at the edge of her thoughts. She had read about his foundation, seen the articles, the interviews, the praise. The fallen billionaire turned benefactor. It should have made her bitter, but instead it only made her ache. Because every headline reminded her that he'd actually done what he promised. He'd changed. The bell above the door jingled late one morning. Clara glanced up from her paperwork, ready to greet whoever came in. Her pen froze mid-air. It was him. Liam stood just inside the doorway, sunlight catching in his hair. He looked different, simpler. A grey shirt, rolled-up sleeves, no expensive watch, no armor of wealth. He looked ordinary, and somehow more real than ever. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the coffee machine filled the silence between them. "Coffee black?" she said, finally, her voice calm but unsteady. He smiled faintly. "You remember." "I try not to forget the things that cost me sleep," she replied. A hint of a laugh slipped through his nerves. "Then maybe I should leave before you lose more of it." "Too late. You already sat down." He obeyed her unspoken permission and slid into the same booth where everything began. She poured his coffee, steady hands, quiet heartbeats. "How's your dad?" he asked softly. "Better. He's walking again. Doctors say he's improving." "That's good," he said, meaning it. "I'm glad." She nodded, folding her arms. "So what are you doing here, Liam? You finally checking up on your charity project?" He winced but didn't flinch away. "I'm here because I missed the only place that ever felt honest." "Honest?" she echoed, a small, incredulous smile tugging at her lips. "You lied to everyone here." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I keep coming back, to remember the difference." She leaned against the counter, watching him. "You still think you can fix this?" He looked up at her, eyes steady. "No, I just want to be someone you don't have to forgive anymore." The words hung there, heavier than any apology. The diner door opened again, a gust of wind carrying in the smell of rain. She turned to greet a new customer, giving herself a moment to breathe. When she looked back, he was still sitting there. Same booth, same coffee, same quiet patience. And maybe that was what hit her most. He wasn't trying to win her back. He was simply there. She walked over, placed a small plate beside his cup, a slice of pie on the house. "On the house?" he asked, smiling. She met his gaze, her voice soft but firm. "Let's just say you've earned a refill." And though neither said the word forgiveness, it floated quietly between them, warm, unspoken, and finally real. The diner had grown quieter as the day wore on. The lunch rush faded into soft conversations, clinking silverware, and the low hum of a radio playing an old jazz tune. Outside, late afternoon sunlight spilled through the window, tinting everything gold. Liam sat in the same booth, his coffee long gone cold. He wasn't sure how long he'd been there, only that Clara hadn't asked him to leave. That felt like progress. She moved around the room, wiping tables, refilling sugar jars, pretending not to look his way. But every now and then, her eyes would flicker toward him, just for a second, then away again. Finally, she came over, setting down a fresh cup in front of him. "Still black?" He smiled faintly. "You remembered?" "Old habits die hard." He took a sip, then set the cup down, fingers tracing the rim. "You ever think about what would have happened if I'd just been honest from the start?" She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You mean if you'd walked in here and said, 'Hi, I'm a billionaire pretending to be broke so I can test humanity'?" He grimaced. "Okay, yeah, that sounds terrible when you say it like that." "It was terrible," she said, though there was a hint of amusement in her tone. He looked up at her. "If I could change it, I would. Every second of it." "You already did," she said quietly. "The hard way." Liam's gaze softened. "Then maybe that's what I needed." Silence settled again. Comfortable this time. She sat across from him, her apron folded neatly in her lap. "So," she said, "what does a reformed billionaire do with his time now?" He smiled. "I spend my mornings at the foundation, my afternoons visiting projects, housing, schools, small businesses, places that remind me how good people are when no one's watching." "And your nights?" He hesitated. "Mostly thinking about coffee." "Coffee," she repeated, smirking. "You've got to come up with better excuses." He laughed, the sound soft and genuine. "Maybe I just miss the company that came with it." Her smile faded a little, not from anger, but from something gentler. "You know, I used to think forgiveness meant pretending something didn't hurt. Turns out it's more about letting it stop owning you." He nodded slowly. "Then I hope someday you let me be part of whatever comes after that." She studied him for a long moment. "You really mean that, don't you?" He nodded. "Every word." The bell above the door jingled, breaking the tension. A group of teenagers wandered in, laughing, ordering fries and milkshakes. Clara stood to take their order, her voice light and practiced. But as she walked away, she glanced back at him, just long enough for him to catch the faintest hint of a smile. He felt something lift inside him, something small, fragile, but real. When she returned to his table, she said, "You staying long?" "I was thinking about sticking around for dinner." "You can't buy dinner here," she teased. "You know that, right?" He grinned. "Then I guess I'll just owe you. Again." She rolled her eyes but didn't argue. "You're impossible." "Maybe," he said, "but I'm not leaving this time." Her eyes met his, and for once she didn't look away. Outside, the sky shifted from gold to orange, then to deep blue. Inside, the hum of the diner grew softer, the kind of quiet that comes when two people finally stop running from the truth. Clara poured him one last cup and sat down across from him again. "Refills on the house," she said. He smiled, eyes warm. "I'll take that as a yes." She shook her head, laughing softly. "Don't push your luck." And as the neon sign flickered back to life above them, neither of them noticed how easily the pieces of their story were falling back into place, one cup of coffee at a time. A year later, the city felt different. The noise hadn't changed, but somehow the rhythm had. It was softer now, like the world had learned to breathe again. The Morningstar Diner stood brighter than ever, the once flickering neon sign fully repaired. Its windows gleamed, its booths freshly polished. The diner had become more than a local spot. It was a symbol, a story people whispered about, the waitress who showed a billionaire the price of kindness. Inside, the lunch rush had just ended. Clara wiped down the counter, her hair tied loosely, her smile easy. The exhaustion that once clung to her had been replaced by something lighter, peace. A familiar voice came from behind her. "You still clean that counter like it owes you money." She turned and laughed. Liam stood there, dressed simply, white shirt, rolled sleeves, a little older, a little more human. His eyes carried the same warmth she'd learned to trust again. "Old habits," she said. "Some of us don't have an army of assistants to do the scrubbing." He smiled, walking closer. "Hey, I scrub floors now, too. Foundation offices get dusty." "That's different," she teased. "You probably use designer soap." He laughed, then looked around. "It looks amazing in here." "It should," she said proudly. "The Monroe Foundation paid for the renovations." He raised an eyebrow. "You could have picked another name, you know." She smirked. "Why would I? It's catchy." For a moment, they just stood there in the glow of the diner lights, the quiet hum of the city outside wrapping around them like a heartbeat. "How's your dad?" Liam asked. "Better every day," she said softly. "He's walking without the oxygen machine now. He actually wants to volunteer at one of your shelters." Liam's smile faltered slightly. "They're not my shelters anymore. They belong to the people running them, you included." Her eyes softened. "You really let go of all of it?" He nodded. "The board's fully independent. I just help when I'm needed. Turns out, I like being useful more than being powerful." She tilted her head, studying him. "You know, you've changed." "Yeah? Yeah. You used to look like a man who was chasing something he couldn't catch. Now you look like someone who found it." He smiled quietly. "Maybe I did." There was a long pause, filled only by the soft clatter of dishes in the kitchen. Then Liam reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He slid it across the counter. "What's this?" she asked warily. "Don't worry, it's not a check." Inside was a letterhead from the Monroe Foundation. On it, her name, listed as Director of Community Partnerships. Clara blinked. "You're offering me a job?" "Not offering," he said. "Asking. You've been running this diner like it's a second home for half the neighborhood. We need that heart at the foundation." She looked down at the paper, her pulse quickening. "Liam, I don't know if I'm ready for—" He leaned in, voice gentle. "You've been ready your whole life." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the world outside seemed to fade. Clara exhaled slowly, then smiled. "Okay, but I'm keeping the diner open. Non-negotiable." "Deal," he said, his grin spreading. She extended her hand across the counter. He took it, their fingers intertwining naturally, like something that had always been waiting to happen. "Coffee's still on the house," she said softly. He laughed. "Then I guess I'll keep coming back." They stood there, two people who had tested the limits of trust, broken them, and built something stronger in the wreckage. Outside, the city buzzed with life, unaware that inside a small diner on the corner, redemption had finally found its place. And as the neon sign glowed steady and bright, it was clear. Some stories don't end with a goodbye, but with the quiet promise of forever. So that's how the story ends. But you're still here, aren't you? If you've stayed with me until this moment, maybe something in this story touched your heart too. Quietly, deeply, the way truth often does. Clara and Liam's journey wasn't really about money or mistakes. It was about learning that kindness isn't weakness, it's courage. As the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's the core of healing, to act with decency, even when the world isn't watching, even when no one applauds. Forgiveness, too, isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about freeing yourself from it. Epictetus wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." We can't control life's storms, but we can choose whether to let them harden us or shape us into something better. So if this story reminded you of someone you once forgave, or someone you still need to, take that as a sign. Let compassion be your rebellion, and peace your reward. If this touched you in any way, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay with us, because stories like this aren't just told, they're lived.